Good Monday morning and welcome to McKenty Live. What do you think it's like to spend most of your life, 2/3 of your life, 42 years of your life in prison? We'd be very glad this morning to hear from people who have in fact been in prison. We'd be glad to hear from the relatives and families of men or women who have been in prison. We welcome your calls at 1-800-363-9995. And of course, calls from the general public, questions relating to the prison system, what it does, what it doesn't do. And it gives me a lot of pleasure this morning to welcome to McKenty Live Gilles Thibault, who has spent, indeed, 42 years of his 59 years in prison. Welcome, Gilles.
Thank you, sir.
And Gilles has written a book. I spent 42 years of my life in prison. The book is in French and will be translated and is selling extremely well and will be translated soon and be available in English. Gilles, it was 42 years.
It was, yes, sir.
You're now 59?
I'm now I've been 60 3 days ago.
Oh, well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
What was the, how did it all start?
It started, I was in a boarding college in Rigaud. I was 13 years old in June 1943. Yeah. I'm called to the office there, the director. Yeah. It was run by Catholic priests, not brothers, but priests.
All right.
And I'm told that my mother died, and she's in Montreal here. She's exposed there, but I couldn't go because it was my the end of the year's exams, and also they had nobody to take me. So I didn't think that the reasons were very valid, and I waited till it got dark, and I stole the bicycle of the priest who wouldn't let me come to see my mom. And I went, and I rode the bike, and I got here about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I seen my mom, and it was only a matter of time. I mean, 2 or 3 days I was arrested, and I went in front of a judge called Nicholson, Judge Nicholson, at the juvenile court, St. Denis and Boulevard, and I got sentenced to 4 years in reform school for stealing the Catholic priest's bike. And that's the way it started, sir.
That's the way it started, boy. 4 years for stealing a bike to go and see your mother, who was dead.
That's right. Of course, if the same offense would happen in 1990, I'm sure they wouldn't even interrupt my studies.
No.
They would have punished me.
Be different. Now, what then became the pattern of your life?
Well, the pattern was, when I lost my mother, I was all alone. Right. Because my mother, I had no father, or I probably had a father, but I never knew him.
Right.
And my mother was a prostitute, and when she died, she was the one that used to pay for my college for boarding. It was a very expensive college, one of the best, if not the best in Quebec. And then I was all alone, and I didn't mean to steal the bike. I just wanted to see her before they buried her, and I said to myself, well, I don't deserve those 4 years, you see. When you're 15 or 13 years old, beg your pardon, you don't think like like an adult. Yeah. So I escaped from reform school about 10 times, and 6 months later I was sentenced to 2 years in a maximum city jail in Bordeaux. Yeah. And my offense was not wanting to stay with the Catholic brothers at the reform school.
Okay.
So that made it 6 for the same bike, 6 years. And it was a pattern. I went to Bordeaux, I was 15 years old. I was with men twice as my age there. I was lost. It wasn't the college anymore, you know. It was quite so radical a change. And it's pretty hard for a 15-year-old to learn to love his neighbor and to become better than he was. Yeah. And I had to do things to be placed by myself, because at 15, I mean, the homosexuals, you know, like it was like they call that wolves inside the walls. You know, they were after me and all that. So I served 16 months of that 2 years in the dungeon in Bordeaux, and during that time I went, and when they used to hang almost every week there, once a week in the 40s, And once the hangman would declare the sentence, the guy that dead, it was inmates who used to take him, put him on a stretcher and wash him. So I was chosen to do that at 16 years old. And when I got out of Bordeaux, to me, society was no good. Nobody was any good. I was the only good one, and I spent my life in prison. It'd be a long story if I tell you, but I never used any violence. I made armed robberies. I got out of Bordeaux, I was 17. I had no place to go. In them days, they used to give you a tramway ticket. There was no buses, there was tramways. And naturally, the only place I knew was St. Lawrence and St. Catherine, where I sold the bike. So I went back there, and I met guys that came from St. Vincent and Bordeaux. And the same afternoon, I got out 10 o'clock in the morning, April 1947. At 4 o'clock that same afternoon, I was picked up again for attempting an armed robbery, and I was sentenced to 2 years in St. Vincent de Paul Penitentiary. So in the 8 years, I was 6 hours on the street. 8 first years of incarceration.
So you were in Bordeaux, you were in St. Vincent de Paul, later you were in Archambault.
Right. But in them years there was only one penitentiary in old Quebec. It was the old penitentiary, St. Vincent de Paul. Yeah. We were 1,500 in there. There was room for about 900. So there were guys sleeping on the floors and everywhere. And
a lot of sexual brutality?
A lot of it, yeah. Young boys getting raped, even killed, and very seldom would they catch the ones who would do that, because in them years nobody would talk. You know, there was no stool pigeons, there were no such things that they would investigate, but very, 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 very few times did I can't remember a man getting caught for killing inside the walls, unless he would do it in front of everybody.
Did you ever try to escape?
I did, yes. In the 6 days, and I got caught. I was no good at stealing and no better at escaping. I wasn't born for that. I got caught and sent to super maximum institution at 1300 Monte Saint-François in Laval, and that's where I met Jacques Mestrin, one of the most wanted men in Canada after that, and not only in Canada but all over the world. He was public enemy #1.
Later he was killed in Paris.
Right.
Now, we're going to be right back. Our lines are blazing. We're going to be right back with Gilles Thibault. I don't have to tell you what a fascinating man and story he is just telling. We'll be right back with him and with your calls after this short break. Welcome back to McKenty Live, talking with a man, Gilles Thibault, who has spent 42 years of his 60 years in prison. And now, go right to the calls. A couple of quick questions.
Yes,
were you ever subjected to corporal punishment?
Yes, I did, sir. In 1947, I got 26 strokes in 9 days for, at first, refusing to work, and then for causing problem at the isolation block there in the hole, or whatever you call it.
This was the lash. This was whipping.
Right.
How did they do this?
They would tie. You were tied up on a table, very narrow table and long table. You were tied up. You couldn't move, and there was a bag on your head so that you couldn't see the officer who would whip you. And then the warden would read to everybody that, because there had to be a lot of witnesses, so it usually was the officers who used to work in the daytime. They stayed at 5 o'clock at night. They always done that after the prison was locked up. And I got 26 strokes in 9 days, and I even remember the dates, because it hurts that much. It was September 6, September 9, and September 15, 1947, for refusing to work and for causing problem in the dungeon.
Okay, and now we'll take some calls for Gilles Thibault. Lachine, go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Thibault, I'd just like to ask you a few questions there.
Go ahead.
Okay, number one, being that I was in myself for 2 years in Lascaux, and I'm 24 now, so I was there around 16 years old, and they were treating me pretty bad over there, and they beat you and everything. They try and make sex to you and all that, and I'd just like to know how it felt to be in, and how it feels now, your freedom from being out.
Well, it feels great. Naturally, it's going to be a slow process, reinsertion in society, sir. But it's just great, and I have good people surrounding me. I was married not too long ago, I was lucky enough to meet Mr. Stanky, who promoted. I wrote a book, and I'm selling book, and I love it. I just love it. I mean, but I noticed people live a little too fast, much faster than they did in the 40s.
Okay, and TMR, go ahead, please.
Yes, hello. I'd like to know, in the prison system, is it a lot better to become like a Mr. Tough Guy or to really just become like a loner? Because and you get a lot in the movies, like you'll get the different kind of groups, and usually when you're new there, they'll like they'll take it like a certain way. So I'd like to know if is it better.
Okay.
Yeah, I can understand your question, sir. I think it's best not to hang around with gangs because they got rivalry. They got quite a few gangs inside the walls. But now, in the 80s and 90s, it's not half as bad as it used to be. But still, it's best to stay by yourself, or you can talk to everybody, but don't respect what they think is right. But you don't have to share it, and that's the only way you're going to live through it. If you mind your business, stay by yourself. There's so many things now in the 90s. You can read, you can learn a trade, and you can be busy without belonging to a gang inside of the walls. That's the last thing you want to do.
Gilles, what was your attitude to the guards?
The guards, well, in the 40s and the 50s, I was like everybody else's. They were no good. But now in the 80s, I finally lit up. It took me 27 years to understand I was the guy that was bad, that was wrong, well, the guards today, I mean, they got an 8-hour shift to do. They didn't come and get you on the street, so it's not their fault for
Okay.
That's the way I feel.
All right. Montreal, go ahead, please.
Hi. First of all, I would like to say to Mr. Gilles, good luck in the new way.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. And for myself, I was in a year in a jail.
Yes.
And I believe in our society that if somebody do something, he's supposed to be punished.
Right.
It doesn't matter if he took a penny or he took 100.
Yes, it's the principle, yeah.
Yeah. What I believe that in myself, if you really want to be somebody, it doesn't matter if you have money or not. It's up to you.
Okay, sir. Thank you for calling. Interesting call. Do you think that the system that you went through helped you or hurt you? And does it help to rehabilitate people, or does it not help to rehabilitate them?
The system in them days and even in our days don't help to rehabilitate people. No, the man who rehabilitates, he does it on his own.
Despite the system?
Despite the system. The system is not there. All the institution administration is interested in is that the count is even at night.
Yeah.
Nobody is missing,
Yeah.
and there's no violence inside of the walls, and that's it.
Yeah.
You yourself have to decide that you're going to better yourself. You're going to, because you can learn a trade and you can
Okay.
read.
And
but nobody will do it for you.
Okay. South Shore, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I spent not a long time in jail, but I did notice that there was quite a difference between, like, as you were saying, the guards and your basic police officer. The police officers, they've got a tough job, but the guards seem to take an extreme position, and I don't think that it was as justified as, I don't know, the gentleman here seems to have a good point that it is a tough job, but I think they went a bit too far.
I think so too, sir. I know so. Yes, they do, yeah. Unfortunately, it's not fortunately, it's not the majority in our years, but in the 40s, it was awful. They weren't satisfied that you were locked up. They just made sure that they tried all they could that you wouldn't come out alive, and fortunately, very, very fortunately, it's not like that anymore, sir.
Gilles, here you are this morning. You look healthy. You sound happy. You sound like a man who was glad to get up and start Monday morning this week.
Yes.
How did you, and I don't know if you can summarize this, how did you survive 42 years, many of those years, in a brutal environment? How did you survive?
Well, I think that at the beginning, I was living 24 hours at a time, like an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I was like I told you off the air, while the young people my age were, learning how to make love and being love and love somebody. I was learning how to stay alive. I was learning how to fight. I was learning the opposite. I had no time to think about suicide or nothing, because it's like it's a jungle. It's an asphalt jungle. I mean, the maximum security institution at the federal is something that you cannot explain with words. You have to go there. Even if you visit it, you can't have any idea. So I think that after 27 years of incarceration, I went in front of Claude Wagner, Judge Wagner.
Yes.
And I was accused of being an habitual criminal, which was right. And after 7 months, I wrote a letter to him and explained to him why there were individuals like myself living. And he read the letter, and I told him I never had a visit in 25 years, in 27 years. I never had nobody who came to see me. And he investigated, and 8 days later, he acquitted me. He didn't sentence me. And from then on, I said to myself, if a man like Claude Wagner thinks that I can make it, I must be able to make it.
Isn't that interesting?
That's what helped me.
Claude Wagner, of course, later ran for the leadership of the Conservative Party.
That's right.
And was considered a very, very tough judge.
Right.
And we'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back to McKenty Live, talking to Gilles Thibault about prison life. Montreal, go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Thibault there. I would like to congratulate you for what you're doing, because I'm a policeman working in Montreal right now, and I hear a lot of story about inmates who cannot make it and they go back in. But I'm positive you're on the right track, and if you continue the way you started there, you're going to make it. So.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank
officer.
you very much.
We appreciate your call. Rosemont, go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Sherry, and I'd just like to say congratulations, and I hope you do the best in this world.
Thank you, ma'am.
And, like, I'm in sort of your position. My mother walked in on me when I was 6 years old, and I've hated this world because I always thought everybody's trying to take everybody away from me, whoever loved me. And I'm 19 now, and I've been in trouble with the police, and I've been on probation and everything. And I just don't know how to deal with it. Like, how did you just all of a sudden just turn around, and did you have somebody to talk to about your anger? I know you had to have anger, because I do.
Okay, the good question, Sherry. How about the bitterness and the anger about society and a raw deal?
No, I got rid of that. I felt like that for 27 years, the first 27 years of my incarceration. But then when I started to read, and I read a lot in psychology and all kinds of other books, and believe in God. I believe in somebody. There is somebody somewhere who runs us all. There's no question about that. And then, as soon as I started to read and believe that, I felt I stopped hating everybody. I stopped blaming everybody for what was happening to me, and I felt much better. And ever since, it's been the easy way, if you can call it that way, inside the walls.
Gilles, somebody else would come through, would go through what you went through, and they would come to the conclusion that there was no God, there was no fairness, it was all a con game.
No.
And you've come to the opposite conclusion. Why?
Yes.
Why?
Well, it's not a conclusion, it's a certainty. I am sure that there is a God. There's somebody that's watching us all much stronger than every one of us. Because I'm going to tell you, I'm going to make it very short. One day in the 70s, I was in my cell, all by myself. It's 11:30 at night, and I get, like they call it, a nervous breakdown. You know, I fall in, and there was no nurses, and there was no officers around, and I was all alone, and I really thought that was the end. And I didn't believe in nobody until then. And then I looked up. I don't know who I was talking to. I said, look, if you're there, you have to help me, because that's it. I can't make it anymore. And I don't want to amplify. I don't want to lie, Mr. McKenty, but 15 minutes later, I felt like if I took 10 Valiums. I was loosened up. I got up. And then I knew that was a straight answer, you know. He answered me, and nobody now can tell me that there's no God. I believe in God.
Montreal, go ahead, please.
Okay, since you've been such a long time behind the walls, you made a book I heard about, and what do you think you're going to do with your life now?
Well, I'm going to do my best with it. As a matter of fact, I got married last week. I have a very, very good person with me who teaches me how to live on the street, and I make conferences. I'm a very young man, you know. I'm only 30. I was 30 years old for the second time, but I don't feel like that. And, well, I don't know. I'm good for another 20, 25 years at least, and I don't think I'm old at all. And I don't think that the 42 years I spent inside the walls were lost, because it took that to make me understand that I was wrong.
Now, you mentioned your marriage. You've only been out of prison for a matter of a few months.
That's right.
You were married a few weeks ago. How can you be so lucky? You're a happily married man.
Well, it's probably for, first of all, believing in God, second of all, thinking positively, and third of all, realizing that I had to adjust to society, and that society adjusts to me. And when you think positive and you're sincere, it usually pays off.
Ottawa, go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Thibault. I was wondering if you could tell me what the convicted criminal can do to have good luck finding a job and keeping it, because I seem to be running into the problem where I feel like I'm destined for welfare for the rest of my life.
Well, don't, sir. I mean, I was lucky. I was very lucky. Sure, I'm an exception because, like I said, Mr. Stanky met me and gave me my break. I had written a book, Inside the Walls. I finished it outside, and he published it for me. But don't give up. Don't give up. I mean, there are organizations today. I mean, you will, I'm sure, if you persevere, you're going to make it. There's no problem.
Now, Gilles, you're spending a lot of time out talking to groups. What kind of groups?
Yeah, I'm making conferences in reform schools, everywhere. Libraries hires me, like this week, tomorrow and Wednesday, I'm going to Blainville and Three Rivers. I go to Quebec, Ottawa, all, yes, I do that. I make conferences. I even went to talk for the city of Montreal. I talked to 117 policemen. Yeah. And 60 people who worked for them, like in the daytime, watching for burglaries on the street, and they wanted to know what to do for stopping the guys to break into their home. I did, and it was a success. I had a phone call not too long ago. They said, since you came and explained to us what to do, we got 30% less theft. So that's what I do. I mean,
and you're speaking to young people?
Oh, yeah, very, 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 very often, and I love it.
Okay, right back with Gilles Thibault after this short break. Gilles Thibault, I want to thank you for being our guest this morning. You're an example. You could have been a loser, and you're a winner, and I wish you every happiness.
Thank you, Mr. McKenty, and I was very happy to be here.
Thank you. Tomorrow on McKenty Live, should Canada have more strict gun controls? See you tomorrow at 11.
Neil McKenty's Wardrobe, provided exclusively by Henry Marks on Drummond Street and Westmount Square. Transportation for McKenty Live provided by Bernard Limousine, 353-5881.